Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to this Science Careers Outside the Lab session on legal services. We're delighted that you've been able to join us today. My name's Karen Pearson and I'm one of the careers consultants from the Newcastle University Careers Service, and I'm being helped today by my colleague Angela Smee. Just a few, we want you to spend most of the time obviously talking to our fantastic panel who are going to introduce themselves in a moment. But before we do that, I just want to go through a few housekeeping bits and pieces around the session that we have today. So starting off here. Just to alert you to the fact the session is being recorded. So if you don't want to appear on the recording, you can switch off your camera. We'd like it, if possible, for you to maybe switch on your camera in the Q&A part of the session so that our panelists can see who they're talking to. And obviously, we appreciate that, but we understand that not everybody will wish to do that. Really, what we're doing a very quick introduction. There's going to be minimal amount of slides. This is really an opportunity for you to hear a little bit about our panelists, but also to ask them questions. And we think this is the most important part of the session, really. So lots of questions about their career history, about what they studied, how they ended up where they did, because they've all ended up in quite different places to where they started out. So there's some good stories to hear. So in terms of asking the questions, we'd like you to use the chat box perhaps while they're doing introductions, the questions you maybe already have that you want to ask. So you can pop those in the chat box, and Angela and I will monitor that and ask the questions on your behalf. You can also use your raise hand function, and that's during the Q&A part after the introductions, if you'd like to ask people things directly. The only thing is, if you've raised your hand and had your question answered, remember to put your hand down, and then that helps us kind of identify who wants to ask questions and who's already been through that process. Okay, so moving on there, I think we're now at the point where it would be nice for you to meet the panel. I'll stop sharing my screen and put them in front of you. Enjoy. Okay, so I think we'd like to start with Charlotte. Charlotte, you're still muted.
I'll start again. Sorry, everybody. Schoolboy error. So hello, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. That's really kind of you. I'm a lawyer working down in on the quayside, not at the moment. I'm currently in my son's bedroom. And I work at a big law firm called Womble Bond Dickinson. You may or may not have heard of them. We're a big top 20 law firm, and I work in the agriculture team. And I can hear you all scratching your heads thinking, what? How did you end up in agriculture? Well, I'll give you a brief sort of timeline of how that happened. So I'm not that dissimilar to you, I promise. I started at Newcastle University doing a genetics degree. I quite enjoyed mucking about in the lab during my dissertation, and I have to be honest, with absolutely no idea what a PhD involved. Over and above more of the same, I enrolled in one at St Andrews University, and I worked with wonderful Professor Gary Taylor for 3 years, and I had a very happy, albeit largely unsuccessful in terms of results, 3 years, pipetting, Western blotting, growing crystals, cycling around synchrotrons, sleeping through lunchtime seminars. Now, come on, you know, you've all done it, and very much enjoying myself. And it was really only after I got my PhD and I started my postdoc, and I realized that I now actually had to do science as a job, that the imposter syndrome set in. I would sit with colleagues who were, including my husband, my now husband, who was completely and genuinely absorbed and passionate about the science. And I just wasn't, and I felt like an outsider. And at some point, that analysis led me to realize I wasn't really enjoying it anymore, to be honest. Which was a bit sad, and in truth, that realization led me to panic a bit, coupled with the fact that I just signed my first 30-year mortgage and my fixed term contract only lasted for 2 years. That level of panic started to multiply at the rate of knots. And I'd spent all this time training to be a scientist, for doing this for the next 40 years of my life, and rolling from contract to contract. There's just no way I could get comfortable with that, and I didn't enjoy it enough. And really the harsh reality of becoming a career postdoc, surviving from grant to grant, just held too much uncertainty for me. And so I started to change things up. I started to go on all the postgraduate occupational and personal development courses made available through the university. I seized every opportunity to try and do something different, add of my CV, which eventually led me to becoming a postdoctoral representative at higher level meetings within the university. So I would sit alongside union reps, HR rep personnel, heads of departments, deans, and I would put forward what I saw as the plight, but in hindsight was actually employment law issues surrounding the postdoctoral contract working. And I am sure that I was quite a tiresome pebble in the shoe for some time. But anyway, I loved it. And the match was lit, as they say. And I went to the careers advisors on campus and I said, well, I really like that. So what can I do with it? And they said, well, how about management consultancy or law? Well, to this day, I still don't know what a management consultant does. But I walked away with this handbook, which you'll see is dated 2007. I've kept hold of a copy of it. And the rest, as they say, is history. So that's the Chamber's Guide to Being a Student, Student's Guide to Becoming a Lawyer, very helpful. And my law career started with a work placement week at Wimbledon Dickinson, which was then Dickinson Dees. I was offered a training contract during that week. I was on cloud 9. The firm paid for me to go back through university, small stipend. And yes, I had to eat a lot of baked beans and pasta during those 2 years. And no, I didn't enjoy living in a damp, slug-infested flat. Needs must. And then I joined WBD as a trainee 2009, and I was in agriculture. First 6 months, did 3 more seats, property litigation, pensions, private client. I just tried everything, open for everything. So my daily role now as an agricultural solicitor, well, what does that mean? Well, I do rural property work for a broad range of clients. That's what I put on my CV. What does that actually equate to? Looking after rural estates, basically. So if you think Downton Abbey, Tweed, flat caps, black Labradors, none of which I own or have, you're basically there. And that's my day-to-day job. And 10 years on, I still enjoy coming to work. Every day is different, every file's different, every client's different, and it's just a great career. And I'd kind of sort of leave off to say, you know, one of the things that I've been asked when I've done this before is, so what's your main sort of thinking about why did you do the switch? And it was about finding happiness and enjoyment in what I wanted to do. And I would say to be courageous in what you want to be doing, and don't be frightened to try something new or something different, because you never know what might happen if you open that door. So that's probably enough of me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's great, Charlotte. Some inspiring stuff there. And I think now we can move to Stephen. Stephen, you want to unmute yourself and a 5-minute introduction to get us started? That would be lovely. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, my name's Stephen Banks. I work for EnviResearch, which is a regulatory consultant. So originally I started off as a biochemistry undergrad at York University. So after studying there for 3 years, I then did a master's at Newcastle in industrial and commercial biotechnology. And then from there moved into my first job working for Procter & Gamble within the labs and the initial sort of product development and research stages. From there, I moved on to my PhD, which was titled Smart Formulation for Precise Crop Protection. So that focused around looking into the effects of, well, the formulation of herbicides and how that'll affect uptake into plants, and then the efficacy and the control of weed species that you'll get from then on. From there, I've moved into EnviResearch, into something quite similarly related. So predominantly focus on plant protection products and looking into the regulatory framework around that. So things like getting product approvals or proving that a chemical active that a client wants to bring forward is the same as the originally approved chemical. So my day-to-day is generally sort of, you know, wake up, answer a lot of emails, get in touch with clients or regulatory bodies, and then proceed with whatever technical documents we have for the day. So yeah, I'd originally decided to move out of lab-based work after my PhD, primarily because of one machine, liquid chromatography mass spectrometry, which is just unendingly broken. So yeah, I guess that's a rough summary of me.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'm very interested in why chromatography is so broken. I think that sounds like a bad deal, doesn't it? That's great. Thanks very much. And our third speaker is Elliot. Elliot, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, morning everybody. My name is Elliot Stevens. I work for a company called HGF Limited. We are a law firm. We specialise in intellectual property, so that's patents, copyright, trademarks, designs, that kind of thing. So it's a very specialised area of the law that we deal with. In terms of my background, I studied at Newcastle University. My undergrad was in chemistry and medicinal chemistry back in 2012, which seems like a lifetime ago now. Graduated in 2016, and as part of my degree I also did some time at GlaxoSmithKline working in the labs, developing new drugs for cystic fibrosis. In terms of the switch of career, because I've kind of come from science into law, similar to what Charles just talked about before, I just didn't enjoy the lab. It wasn't my cup of tea, and I found that out pretty quickly by being in there and realising I didn't enjoy it. I think the main thing I didn't enjoy about it was the fact that I found myself doing the same thing every day. Which, funnily enough, Stephen mentioned LCMS, which I found myself doing 2 or 3 times a day for a whole year, which gets quite laborious after a while. So I decided I needed to do something a bit different. So I was coming up to the end of my degree in 2016. I actually got in touch with the Careers Service, who put me in contact with a few different potential employers who do something a bit different but still involves science in some way. And one of them was to train as a patent attorney, which is what I ultimately took up and managed to get. Since leaving university, I've worked for my current firm for about 18 months, but before that I was at a different IP firm where I worked for about 3.5, 4 years. And what my job really involves, being a patent attorney, is what you do is you learn about your clients' inventions or their brand, their designs, all that kind of thing. And then it's my responsibility to draft up legal documents to try and protect their innovation. So every day is different. We have different clients that we work on, different technologies that we work on. And again, some days I'm drafting legal documents, other days I'm appearing before patent officers in court to try and argue a case for a client. And then other days, again, I can be on site at one of my clients learning about their technology and innovation. So every day is really different, which is what I enjoy most about the job. In terms of advice I would give people, I think I was pretty lucky because I found out quite quickly that I didn't enjoy being in the lab. What I would suggest is that get as much practical experience as you can in and out of the lab and see what you enjoy. I know my law firm and other law firms are quite open to offering, work experience days or internships, and those are a great way to find out if you're going to enjoy that career before you really commit to it. So that would be my advice.
Great advice. Thanks for that, Elliot. Fantastic. And our fourth speaker is Katie. I'll pass over to you now, Katie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi everyone, so I'm Katie. My career path is slightly shorter than everyone else who has spoken. I'm currently working for Novartis in regulatory affairs. I'm in the CMC department, which stands for Chemical Manufacturing and Controls. So essentially, when you try and get a pharmaceutical product on the market, you have to provide regulatory agencies and health authorities with a huge chunk of information, from clinical trial information to manufacturing information, and the CMC department work on one part of that big buckler of information. Is probably the best way to explain it. So I did a medicinal chemistry MChem degree at Newcastle. I graduated in 2019. I did 2 summer placements, both of which were in the lab, in the cancer research labs in the Bedson building, and also for AstraZeneca. And those, along with my dissertation, sort of firmly made me decide that I really did not like doing work chemistry in any shape or form. And everyone I knew essentially was going in to do PhDs So I was very much not on board for following that path. I just didn't enjoy it enough to pursue it as a career. So instead I started looking for graduate schemes, and I actually started on the GSK Future Leaders Programme in 2019, but in their consumer business. So brands such as Corsadil, Sensodyne, Voltaren, Beecham, things like that. And it was an R&D grad scheme, so it enabled you to work within all R&D functions, whether it was regs, medical affairs, clinical trials, claims teams, things like that, as well as development teams. So it was quite a good opportunity to see what else was out there, bar the lab, in an industry environment. So I did one rotation in new product development, which was launching new oral healthcare products for different global markets. So you got to partake within the product pipeline and the early development of it without actually being in the lab, and sort of doing it from a more strategic point of view, which is really good. My second rotation was then in global regulatory affairs in CMC. I really, really enjoyed it, and it was working on two main projects. One was changing packaging on products we already had in the market. Every time you make any change, you have to run it past the health authorities, and you have to give them documents. So it was managing that. And then the other one was on a nitrosamine project, which is an industry-wide project that's going on at the moment in pharma and consumer, to risk assess all of your medicinal products for particular chemicals that could be mutagenic. So I then actually cut the grad scheme short. I was only halfway through. I'd really, really enjoyed my rotation in regs and how external facing it was with health authorities and with trade associations. And within GSK, because it's such a global company, you've got exposure to markets all over the world as well. But I was given the opportunity to move to Switzerland through my partner's job. So I took it. So recently moved to Switzerland, and a couple of weeks ago started at Novartis. So I've moved back over to pharma now, still within regs, still within CMC, but slightly different positioning. So my day-to-day role now is sort of in two parts. One is management and oversight of our strategies for our already marketed products, and how we do site divestments, how we do site transfers, and things like that from a regulatory point of view. And then the other part of my role is working in the renal, cardio, and metabolic therapeutic area. So that would be regulatory work a lot closer to the actual drugs that we're making for that therapeutic area. So yeah, bit of a shorter story, but that's my intro.
Okay, thanks to all of our hosts for introducing yourself so competently and so able to sort of get across to us how you've managed to make that move from the lab into a totally different type of career. So that's great. So now we're at the point in the session where we're looking at Q&A, and we already do have some questions in the chat box. Does anyone want to ask a question with the hand function? Or no? Shall I read a couple from the chat box and we'll see how I get on, and then if people want to raise their hand, obviously please do so. We have a good question here from Dia. Please forgive me, Dia, if I've pronounced your name incorrectly there. And the question is, to all the lawyers, how much time does it take to educate yourself in regulatory affairs and patent law? Does it require apprenticeships or training programs to qualify as a lawyer? Who would like to take that one?
I'm happy to take it from a patent law perspective. So you tend to train on the job is the answer, specifically for training to be a patent attorney. You learn the law in your spare time, where you get the spare time to do it, and on weekends. And eventually you set a set of qualifying exams, so professional examinations, which test if you're ready to be a fully fledged patent attorney. So there's a lot of on-the-job training, a lot of evenings and weekends reading the law and reading the case law. And also my firm put me through a postgraduate degree in IP law as well. So there's a few different routes to take, but ultimately it ends up in taking professional exams to qualify.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Did you want to add anything to that, Charlotte?
Yeah, so it's again, there are multiple routes in. There are apprenticeships, where you learn on the job, and I think that's a 6-year route, but you're learning, you're doing a couple of days in the office, a day at university, a study day, with different ratios occurring during the time. That's a relatively new thing in terms of converting from another career or another degree. My route that I took was I did a 1-year conversion course, which is basically a law degree in a year. It's really intense, but you know, it's perfectly doable, and that is apart from jurisprudence, everything in a law degree in a year. And then in your second year, you do a more practical training again at university. And then you decide if you're going down a solicitor or a barrister route, and you sort of learn how to apply what you've already learned in your degree or your conversion degree, and everybody has to do that. So you then sort of converge with law students who've done the longer traditional degree, and then obviously when you're on the job, you have 2 years as a trainee solicitor before you become a qualified solicitor. But to be truthful, every day is a school day. You're learning something new every day, which is part of the joy. So it continues always.
Yes, every day is a school day. I mean, in law, it's just endless, isn't it? Because the law is always changing. We've got a couple more questions related to this, actually. And we've got a question from Navina saying, is it common for companies or firms to take in BSc undergraduates with no background in law? Any thoughts?
Sorry,
about
more
that?
of me talking again. Definitely, yeah, absolutely. It doesn't put them off at all. They like how you think laterally. They like how you can problem solve. You draw a diagram, you'll blow their mind, seriously. It's just we just think differently. And you know, people will say that even to me now. They're like, yeah, if I do something slightly different from what they're expecting, they're like, that's because you're a scientist. I am no longer a scientist, that's not true. But absolutely, it makes you more interesting. You have those life skills, you have those thinking skills already. And you actually stand out from the crowd really easily, especially if you've done a PhD and anything during your time, or postdocing or whatever, and you're already in your career. So absolutely, yeah, definitely it would take students without background in law.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Shard. I think it's really good to hear that the skills that you have are something quite treasured and quite not unique but quite unusual in that world, and that sort of would reassure, I think, students who are thinking of that route. There's a couple of other questions around patent law which have come through. Sam's asking, what is the best way to gain experience or get an internship in patent law as an undergrad scientist? I don't know if you can help there, Elliot.
That's a great question. It can be quite difficult, I will admit, but the best way to do it is just apply speculatively to IP firms. So either my IP firm, there's a couple of others in Newcastle, would be a good place to start. In terms of an internship, I know a lot of the London-based firms do set internships that start, I think it's every September. So once you've graduated, there are schemes you can enter for a year and then figure out if it's something you want to do more long term. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's good. And I think the point about speculative applications is a really good one that you've made there, Elliot, because obviously a lot of things are advertised, but particularly for more, this is quite of a more, would you be offended if I described it as perhaps a more niche area of law, and that perhaps some of the firms who are involved in are quite smaller firms as well as the larger ones, and that smaller firms really do appreciate that kind of approach. And obviously, if you're thinking of doing that, the career service is something we can help you with. We can help you formulate a speculative application where we know that they do work. So one more about patent law. Laura's asking, would you recommend doing a master's or a PhD before applying for patent law?
Good question. I didn't do a PhD, and I managed to train as a patent attorney. So it gives you some idea of a PhD isn't essential by any means, but as Charlotte said previously, it can give you that edge, that advantage over other candidates who might be applying for the same job. I think in terms of the field that I work in, you just need an undergraduate STEM degree. That's the minimum requirement. Anything above and beyond that makes you stand out from the crowd, and it's great. But you can ultimately train to be a patent attorney with a bachelor's or a master's. So that's no problem at all. But again, like Charlotte says, I think the key thing is to really push the skills that you've learned through your degree and through working, you know, in the lab, problem solving, working in a team, communicating with others. Those are the kind of skills that firms really pick up on and want to see. Really.
Yeah. And as Charlotte was saying, they quite like it when you draw the diagram, perhaps.
Yeah.
That's really cool. There's also was quite a lot of interest in patent and patent law. It's about maybe the best way to get some experience, or you know, are there things that, in terms of that standing out idea, what kinds of things might people perhaps put in an application other than the kinds of things you've already mentioned, to help them get into this?
I think from a patent law perspective, a lot of it is there's a lot of technical writing involved. So if you've got work that's involved, you know, where you've had to draft a document that's got lots of technical language in, something like that can really show off your writing skills, which is an essential skill for the job. Again, problem solving, if you think of times you've solved problems either by yourself or in a team, that helps you stand out too. But I think those are the main ones from my perspective.
Yeah, it's that cross skill set. I don't know if you wanted to add to that, any of the other speakers.
I would say from a general lawyer point, what you're doing as a lawyer is you're working with clients in, well, I certainly can be, in either stressful, or they're distressed, or you're distressed because they're distressed, or whatever, but quite stressful environments. And I always sort of think, well, what would I want from a lawyer in such a circumstance? And then think about the skills that you need to be able to deliver that. And that's looking at you as a person and saying, well, what do I need to build on as a person? So it's unique to each of you, and tailoring your skill set to address that, because as Elliot said, it's all about the clients, delivering services, growing the business. I mean, it just gets better and better as time gets on, and you learn more and more, because you're a lawyer and you know your stuff, although you learn more stuff every day, but it's that client handling and looking at skills that you know, you have to be a chameleon. You have to be one person to one client. You know, if I'm working with Lord so-and-so, I'm very much Lord so-and-so's lawyer. But if I'm working with one of my blue chip solar farm clients, I'm very much, you know, a bit more of a lad. You know, you just do. You have to have those real people skills and develop them and show that. And they're easy to get, because if you've got a career service, that's what it's there for. Use it, I would say, definitely.
That's right. Thank you, Charlotte. And it's using those people skills, which is often a driver for our students to want to have a career outside of the labs. I think that's a good point. I just thought this might be a good point when we're thinking about that, to bring in maybe Katie and Stephen, because although you're not lawyers, you're doing a lot of legal work, and maybe this is an opportunity for you to add anything to this discussion about your skills and how you feel that your legal expertise has been developed and delivered.
Yeah, I guess I can go. Because I work with such a global company, we actually have a legal department that advise us on anything that may have more of a legal standpoint. But I guess when you're working with health authorities, you have to be extremely careful with how you propose certain solutions and how you give in certain documents, because obviously you want them to approve what you are sending them. There's also very different outcomes depending on what country you're trying to launch something in as well. So I definitely think it's just having the communication skills and the ability to assess the vibe in the room, so to speak, like Charlotte was saying, about who you're speaking to, and also draw on other people's experience who have worked with health authorities before to understand what their relationship is like with your company compared to others that you may have worked for, and also how they operate in different countries. Some are a lot more conservative than others, depending on where you are. So I think it's just having those communication skills to be able to assess how you should be approaching them in different ways, I think would be really beneficial.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Did you want to add anything, Stephen?
Yeah, I think we found something similar with submissions in that different countries seem to take different attitudes towards them. So some will very strictly interpret the regulation, whereas some you've got a little bit more wiggle room and you can use a bit of sort of clever wording or presenting of data to kind of push it more into what you want from them. But yeah, communication is definitely one of the key points to it for me, both towards clients and the regulatory authorities. So, you know, for example, a lot of clients don't have any experience in the regulatory world at all. So when you've got this big list of data requirements, you've really got to be very specific what it is they need to do.
That's good. Yeah. So that sort of communicating quite complicated stuff to people who are non-experts is sounds like it's quite a common theme, quite a common thread across the piece, doesn't it? Great, thank you. Going back to our list of questions, because we still have some that we haven't answered here. There's a question here. What sort of skills do you think have helped you in your role the most? I think we've mentioned communication skills. We've talked about that for a little while, and we talked to some extent a little bit about cross-cultural skills. Is there anything else that you would kind of add to those two that we've already mentioned? Any of our speakers?
Scientific creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And
what do you mean by that, Stephen? Can you say a bit more about that? That sounds really cool.
Yeah, just so when you've got a not great data set, for example, finding ways you can extrapolate from that data set to fit the requirements of the regulations. So you've got to have a very sort of detailed overview of what the requirements are, and then sometimes see if you can sort of shoehorn little bits in there in creative ways.
Good. And helping that match the needs of the client as well, like you were saying before.
Yeah, because if the clients need to go back and get lab work redone, that's often, you know, months of work and tens of thousands of pounds, possibly hundreds of thousands. So it can really throw them off if they've then got to go back and get anything new, and can totally derail their attempts to get a product on the market. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's a big thing, isn't it? And I guess it's, you know, it's back to all of you really, in terms of your scientific attention to detail, which is it sounds as if it's a big transferable skill into those worlds. We've got quite a few students asking, and you may wish to say a little bit each about this, about what do you do sort of day to day in your job? What does a basic day in your work look like? But if you could maybe give us some insight into that.
Should I go first?
Yes,
Just looking at everyone
please do. Yeah.
So my days are quite varied, but generally what I tend to do is I'm either drafting legal documents to present to the patent officers. So that's essentially outlining what my clients' inventions are. So you've got to be quite to the point, but you've got to include enough technical detail in there for someone else who's not an expert to understand. So you've got to be you've got to be good at writing. You've got to be good at putting your point across in the, you know, as few words as possible. So there's that side of things. Otherwise, I'm prosecuting the applications, so arguing with the patent office why I'm right and they're wrong, essentially. Which again, to Stephen's point, you need to sometimes come up with creative solutions to things that are in your way. And the flip side, so all this as well, I'm sometimes working with clients in litigation and freedom to operate, as we call it. So figuring out if they were to launch a product on the market, are they going to get sued, or are they okay to do that? So those are kind of the three strands that I work on.
Okay, good, thank you. Anyone else? Charlotte, maybe?
Yeah, so on a really exciting day and a non-COVID day, you could be out doing site visits, going to meet your clients, walking around farms. You do a lot of emailing, bit of firefighting, not actual firefighting. It's not that exciting, but you know, you quite often you're spinning plates. You've got to be really good at spinning plates, and by that, you know, I mean balancing a big caseload. You spend a lot. I was, until the last rotation, the trainee supervisor, which is something I've done for about 6 years now. So I'll spend a lot of time sort of looking at documents and teaching, you know, others how to do what I can do, or, you know, what they're doing, and molding it. You spend a lot of time talking to clients, even more now, I would say. Presenting, you're an ambassador at the firm at all times. You know, you have to get out there. We have to sell ourselves to people like you and say, come join us, we're brilliant, and things like that. And also learning as well. You know, you have to do a bit of development, and there's a legal, or there's an expectation of the Solicitors Regulatory Authority that you're constantly learning and increasing your knowledge base and keeping in front of stuff. So yeah, all sorts. Yeah.
Okay, that's great, thanks. How about Katie? Can you give us some insight?
Mine is also quite varied, just depending on what project you're on. Right now I do a lot of training, so I've only recently started, but at GSK, some of my time was spent actually writing regulatory documents for whatever particular change you were looking to make, or whatever license you were looking to change. They are relatively structured, so you don't have to be too like creative with it. I don't really like writing things that much. I'm a very much a bullet point person, but you soon learn how to sort of write in the format that is needed for dossiers, and it's not like it's not huge paragraphs or anything like that. It's very scientific, using the data. And then a lot of my other time is spent in meetings with the global team. So we have responsible people in pretty much every market in the world that will work with us on the global projects, and they'll bring a bit more experience from their individual market of what the health authority wants and what's going on in that market. So a lot of the time is also communicating with them about the projects you're doing and making sure that you've all got the correct information, and also working very closely with supply chain and with quality, because they, you know, having a site transfer, for example, they're going to have a lot of information about that. And then a lot of my other projects are very much about the management and strategy of the project. So it's a lot of discussing timelines and objectives, whether the project is to schedule, whether it's not, whether we need to bring in additional resource for it and things like that. So yeah, very varied. I'd say probably half actually writing regulatory documents, and then the other half is more talking about it and the project management side of things around the regulatory changes.
It's great to hear about the variety in your days. It is, because I think this is what keeps life and keeps you motivated, isn't it? And makes life interesting. How about you, Stephen? What's your typical day like?
So it really depends on the work we've currently got available. Since I was as client facing, it depends on what the clients need doing at the time. But generally, it'll either be preparing technical documents for regulatory authorities, whether that be an active ingredient submission, an amendment to a product registration, or we'll be preparing reviews for the actual client themselves. So, for example, a data gap analysis where they will give us a data package they have. They'll say, we want this product on the market. This is the data we currently have. So we'll go through each of the data points they have, look at where it fits into the regulation, be able to pick out the spots where they need further data, or which bits of the data they currently have aren't up to the sort of standard that's required. So the regulatory documents are generally, you know, you get an outline from whichever authority is you're submitting to. You go down point by point, you fill in those gaps. The ones for the clients are often a bit more tailored, since it depends on the level of expertise that they have and their knowledge of the regulatory world as to how sort of in depth you need to go with that, and whether you can just copy paste a point from the regulation or you've got to explain exactly what it is they need to do.
Okay, wow, thank you, that's great. We haven't got any more questions in the box at the moment. Does anyone want to ask anything? Are you still having a think about what else you'd like to know, guys? I do have one question I could ask while you're having a think about that. And again, I hope you don't feel I'm putting you on the spot, our lovely speakers, but it would be interesting, I think, for us to hear about perhaps the most challenging, or, you know, the most interesting thing that you have worked on in your current job, or perhaps Katie, perhaps that might be in the job you've just left. But, you know, what's been particularly challenging or particularly interesting? What's really got you excited at work? in these roles?
I guess I can go first.
Yeah, thanks, Katie.
I'd say probably working on the nitrate amines project, mainly because it was essentially guidelines that reg authorities brought out all over the world for any medicinal product. So it was across all industry in regard to farmer and consumer. So it was changing guidelines, changing timelines, and different health authorities wanted different things in regards to risk assessments on products. But everyone in industry was doing it at the same time. So the trade association discussions, which is when you get essentially representatives from loads of different industries, they were really interesting because nobody knew what they were doing, essentially, and everyone was making up as they went along within reason. So that was quite interesting to see, because you don't often in the pharmaceutical world get to work with other industries, because most of the time they're your competitors. Occasionally you do. In general, it's kept very separated and also very secret. So it was quite nice to be able to discuss with people from other companies about the same work. So I say that was probably one of the most interesting things, and also just to see the scope of the project and what was being asked of people in quite a short timeline, especially during COVID as well. Yeah, but that was probably really interesting. I can't go into much more detail than that, unfortunately, but yeah.
No, we understand. No, yeah, but that is, yeah, quite a challenge. And as you say, COVID adds that extra dimension, doesn't it? Some of these things. How about our other speakers? What's been particularly challenging or interesting? The best thing you've done in your job, perhaps?
I'm happy to go next if no one else will.
I'll let you go next, yeah. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Probably the most interesting is I work quite closely with one of our clients, and they were just a startup. So essentially, there was just one guy who had an idea, and now it's grown into a 40-man strong, or 40-man and woman strong business. But as part of that, we were getting patent protection and making sure there were no patents in the way to stop them commercially launching. And they got £100 million in investment recently. So being involved and being part of that was quite, was something quite special, and was quite exciting that we helped our clients start from, a bench in a university lab somewhere to now having his, £100 million business. So that was quite exciting. And the other thing that's exciting as well, quite recently, we won an appeal case. Again, these appeal cases don't come up that often, and we managed to win when we weren't expecting to. So we had to stand in front of the patent office and argue our case with the other side, butting in at every opportunity, as you can imagine. So yeah, it was exciting and yeah, good to be involved in that. And we won, which makes it feel better, of course.
Oh, some lovely highlights. Charlotte?
Yeah, I don't go to court. I avoid it like the plague. If I'm in court, I know that something's gone badly wrong on a transaction. Touch wood, has never happened. But I've really enjoyed sort of the corporate support type of roles I do, and that's best way to describe that is when it gets a bit like on the telly, when like Tom Cruise and his thing, people are sat around eating Chinese food, and big boxes of files in everybody's houses, and everybody's sweating, and it's all very dramatic, and it's late at night, and we all think we're very important, and yeah, then we close on a deal, and closing on a deal, that's something really special. That's like, yeah, you're right up there, the adrenaline's running, everybody's running around, everybody's pitching in, it's like proper teamwork. And when you deliver that result on the client and you celebrate that success as a team in the business with your colleagues and with your clients, that's an awesome feeling. And even talking about it, it's making my skin prickle, because it's like, yeah, I love those things. But then you have the slump afterwards, which is not so fun. But the actual high of the corporate transaction, the closure of the deal, yeah, you feel like you're in Ally McBeal or whatever, the Graham Greene Grisham novel or whatever. But yeah, good. Really
Yeah,
good.
great, exciting. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. How about you, Stephen? Your highlight?
I think just getting a big project finished and out the way, really. So we've had a submission lately, which has just ended up being a colossal document. I think there's been most of EnviResearch working on this to some degree. And yeah, when you get, a big chunk of work slapped down on your desk that takes weeks to get through, it's quite satisfying to finally get that finished and in a state where you can send that to the regulators, and obviously they're going to come back with reviews and what have you and bits that need changing, but in the first instance, getting it there is a pretty good feeling.
That feeling of freedom when it's all finished.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Good. We've got a couple of other questions that have popped in. Thank you for that. We've got a question for Elliot. How did you work at GSK during your degree? Was it a placement year? Is the question, Elliot?
Yeah, yes, it was a placement year. So that was in my 3rd year out of the 4-year masters. So yeah, I think you applied through the university, helped you apply to various companies who were hosting those placement years.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. And I think you worked for GSK as well, didn't you, Katie? Or was that after you graduated?
So yeah, GSK was after I graduated, but I didn't want to do a year in industry, so I didn't want to get stuck in a lab. I realised I hated it. So I did summer placements instead. They are harder to get, mainly because companies don't want to train you for a while in the lab and then find that you're only there for like 8 weeks or something. I was able to get my AZ one through a lecturer who used to work at AZ, so he knew some people that he could put me in contact with. But when I was there was a huge amount of people who were on summer placements, and they'd applied through online portals at AstraZeneca, so they still did some. So that you'll find the big companies may have some schemes set up for summer as well. It's just finding them can be quite difficult. So summer placements are possible, they're just harder to come by if you didn't want to do a full year.
Yeah, that's cool. And if any of you are looking for placements or internships, there's a lot of information on our website, and the staff are very happy to talk you through, you know, where those opportunities might be. And obviously you can find quite a lot of opportunities on My Career as well, the sort of vacancy part of our website, just so you know that. We've got a question, another question here, which is, a question from Dia. Can international postgrad students from a biology background qualify for a career in law? Would anyone like to take that?
They'd have to do their conversion like everybody. You'd have to do the conversion and whatever, you know, sort of if they went the IP way, there's special exams for them. So you have to go through that conversion process. But as long as you qualify to get onto that degree or the postgrad degree, and I don't remember in my time when I looked at it that there was any sort of qualifying criteria in terms of what your degree background or which country you'd got your degree in. So yeah, I think it's check which university you want to work with, and but I don't see why not.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, okay, that's good. Thank you. And just one last question, really. Some of our audience who are either there today with us, or perhaps some of the audience who might be listening to the recording later, will be our students who are perhaps in the final stages of a PhD, thinking about their next steps, or early career researchers who've maybe done a couple of short research contracts and maybe looking now to move out into industry. So it's really, are you aware, I know we mentioned about PhDs before, and I remember you said, Elliot, that it might give people a bit of an edge, but it wasn't essential to do. But are you aware of any sort of specific opportunities? Do any of the firms that you work for look specifically for people with PhDs in order to do these roles that you talked about, or any other roles that you may know about?
I think generally, as long as you've got your undergraduate degree, I think they're fairly flexible and open to learning who you are as a person and if you would suit the role. But that being said, if you've done a PhD, I mean, when I did my master's project, I incorporated a bit of IP into that, so a little bit of patents coupled with science. If you can do something like that, I'm sure that will give you a huge edge over other candidates. But generally, PhDs are good, they give you that edge, but like I said, not essential by any means.
Okay, that's great, good. Anyone anything to add to that? Because I think we're coming to the point now where we might be starting to pull this together. Last chance for questions. Anyone want to put their hand up and ask a question? Anyone? Is there anyone there, Ange? I can't see the whole range now. Okay, lovely. Well, I'd just like to go back and share my screen just to point a couple of things out to you. But before I do that, it would be really nice if we could give a virtual round of applause, I think, for our speakers for giving up their time today to come and talk to you and to answer your questions. So if you'd like to do that, that would be much appreciated. That's if you're not aware, that's in the reactions section there. Thank you. Oh, they're coming through. Lovely. Yeah, that's great. It's nice that you all appreciate that. That's lovely. So just to mention, I'll just quickly share my screen to mention just a couple of things for you before we close up our session. So we've all met our panel now. So, okay. And we asked our questions, but this is the last bit I want to share with you. And it's really just to point out that we know lots of scientists are interested, and it's been great to hear the questions you've been asking today about what you could do if you weren't a scientist within the lab, but you were outside the lab. And we have a whole section of our website which is devoted to the kinds of things we've been talking about in this series of talks about careers that you can do, ways you can take your skills into a different career area than one involving laboratories. So just to point that out to you, that's on our website. Off the homepage, you choose the thing on the left that says Explore Occupations, and you'll find it in the Science section. And we've got one more session left. So if you'd like to join us at 3 o'clock this afternoon, we have Science Careers Outside the Lab, which is government and policy this afternoon, which you're very welcome to join us. And you can just sign up for that link on the website, like you did for this one. And then again, if you want some help, if you want to look at the vacancies, if you want to sign up for events, if you want to have one-to-one support from any of us in the career service, you can access that. You can book yourself a nice slot at a time that suits you through mycareer.ncl.ac.uk.